Um, just to give you an introduction of, who I am. I'm Francesca Lazzeri. I'm a machine learning scientist at Microsoft. Specifically, I work out of the Boston office. So here in the Boston area, we are based in the Cambridge office, and it's called the New England Research and Development Center. I focus on machine learning. Specifically, I was a data scientist for many years at Microsoft. I was building end-to-end machine learning pipelines for external customers. And last year, I joined a new team that we are still building, and it's a very exciting journey so far. And I'm more like a machine learning scientist supporting different products teams at Microsoft. So all my products teams are now focusing on creating new softwares, new tools for data scientists and machine learning scientists, so that they can, build their own machine learning solutions. Okay, so let's get started with our lecture for today. So this training course, it's for you if, for example, you are a business analyst or a data scientist. I work with a lot of data scientists who needs to build a time series forecasting model, or just you are someone who, a developer or also in a different industry. It doesn't really matter, but you really want to understand better how time series forecasting works, and you want to also learn how you can eventually operationalize, meaning deploying your time series forecasting models. There are some prerequisites that usually I ask my students to look at. Again, these are not required right now because this is an online class, so you are very, very welcome also to look for these requirements, prerequisites later, learn a little bit more about Python and then go back to this class. But in general, it's very nice if you have already some experience with coding in Python, a basic understanding of machine learning and deep learning topics, as well as some terminology that I'm going to use for some mathematics and machine learning formula. But again, it's not going to be too much. And then it would be great if you also have an Azure account. So the only technical prerequisite is that you're going to have this Azure Notebooks account, just because some of the exercises in Python that I created for this lecture are hosted on a repo, and this repo is hosted on Azure Notebooks account. By the way, Azure Notebooks account is free, so you can actually also access this repo later, and you can also just download it and then eventually use it, try the code by yourself using a different platform, whatever you feel more comfortable with. But just to let you know that this is going to be hosted. All the exercises that I created for you are hosted right now on this repo on Azure Notebooks. What is Azure Notebooks? So probably some of you are not really familiar with this. So Azure Notebooks is a free service for anyone to develop and run code in their browser using Jupyter. Jupyter is an open source project that enables, you can write in Markdown, you can write your own code in Python, R, and also other languages, and Jupyter Notebook for this course is going to show like our Python code and also some Markdown and interactive graphics that, again, we're going to use all these just to learn together more about time series forecasting. The agenda for this training is based on 4 different modules. I like to call them modules just because I find them very independent from each other. So like, for example, if you want to just focus on recurrent neural networks for time series forecasting, you can just take Module 3. If you want just an introduction to time series forecasting, you can just focus on number 1. But again, during this lecture, we're going to to walk through all these 4 modules. And just to be clear, this lecture, since it's the first lecture for me on the Machine Learning Institute platform, is going to focus more on the introduction to time series forecasting, classical methods for time series forecasting, forecasting, such as ERIMA, autoregression, and then we're going to see an introduction to recurrent neural networks, but this is going to be more just an introduction to feed-forward neural networks for time series forecasting. In the future lectures that I'm going to teach on this platform, we are going actually to look more deeply into recurrent neural networks, specifically long-term, short-term memory, and GRU. So we will see together how these can work and how you can apply those neural networks also to time series forecasting problems. And in the final part, we're going to see a couple of real-world use cases that can help you to understand better how you can apply the theory and also some of the packages library that you have learned from Python to a real-world scenario. So as I mentioned earlier, the project is hosted on Azure Notebooks. So this is the link, is a public project, so you can just access it, and you're going to see all the exercises that, again, we're going to also to see together. So I'm going to guide you through those exercises. So feel free also just to follow this lecture and then look at the exercise later, or if you feel comfortable, you can just do and practice yourself while you are listening to this lecture. If you want in general to learn more about Azure Notebooks, you can find more information about Azure at Azure Notebooks at aka.ms. Azure and B of course stands for notebooks. And because, of course, Azure Notebooks in this case, as I was mentioning for these specific lectures, we are going to use them for Python, but you can learn more about how you can use those also with R, or if you want to connect them to different data sources or different computer targets, you can also do all of these on Azure Notebooks. Okay, so let's get started. In the first part, we're going to see what is the time series forecasting. So specifically, what makes it so special, time series, and how you can load and handle time series in Pandas. Pandas is a very powerful library in Python, and how you can check a stationarity of a time series and how you can make eventually, if you want, a time series stationary. Time series is a very important area of machine learning that is, I think, often neglected. So it is important because there are so many prediction problems that involve a time component, and these problems are neglected because it is this time component that makes a time series problem more difficult to handle. So in this lesson, you will discover time series forecasting. I think someone needs to mute. Yeah. So after this introduction to time series forecasting, you will have a better understanding of these big four concepts and categories. So let's get started and understand better what are the different uses of time series. So one of the most important use of studying time series is that it helps us to predict the future behavior of a variable. That is, of course, this future behavior is based on, at least we assume that is based on past experience. For sure, time series is very helpful for business planning, as it helps in comparing the actual current performance with the expected one, hopefully. From time series, we get also to study the past behavior of a phenomenon or a variable under consideration. So this is also important, and we will see very soon what's the main difference between time series and time series forecasting. And we can compare the changes in the values of different variables at the different times or places. Specifically, in time series for financial data, there are two main reasons that I always see that are used around also when we read some of the research papers about financial time series. So the first reason is that, of course, many professors, many researchers try to use time series to understand how prices behave. So in this case, the variance of a time series is very, very relevant, and because tomorrow price is uncertain, and this means most of the time that some statistical methods are the natural way to investigate the prices. Another reason that I see it's very common in financial time series is that we can use our knowledge of, for example, a price behavior to reduce risk or take better decisions. So time series models may, for instance, be used for forecasting, but also option pricing and risk management. These, I'm sure that many of you are very, very familiar with all these scenarios. So what is a time series? So a normal machine learning data set is a collection of observations. So for example, time does play a role in normal machine learning data sets, and so predictions are made for new data when the actual outcome may not be known until some future date. So the future is being predicted, but all prior observations are treated equally. This is, again, in a classical machine learning context. A time series data set is different. So time series adds an explicit order dependence between observations. So this is actually a time observation, as you can see from this slide. And this additional dimension is both a constraint and a structure that provides a source of additional information. And this source of additional information, we will see together how you can use it. Eventually, you can leverage the timestamp column in Python, and you can create additional feature. This is called the feature engineering in machine learning, and how you can eventually create additional features to understand better your data and to build a better model, a more accurate model.